Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ice-Burgh Recap, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins game recaps and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins or anywhere you get your podcast from. Vegas Golden Knights 3, Pittsburgh Penguins 2. Welcome to everybody that didn't see this game because it started at 10 p.m. Eastern. You probably are on the right side of history in this one. The Pittsburgh Penguins, top storyline in this one, played a tremendous opening 40 minutes against the defending Stanley Cup champions, and then they decided to put it in park. And when you do that in this league, more often than not, you're not going to come away with 2 points. And in this instance, the Penguins come away empty-handed at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada. They put it in park, like I mentioned. Vegas roared back, and at that point, the Pittsburgh Penguins, they couldn't shift it back into drive. They're at the point in their careers where if they decide that they're going to rest on their laurels and they're going to say 2 goals is going to be enough tonight, it's 2-0. Yes, Tristan Jarry had been playing stellar over the last 3 games, but you're going up against a team that, yes, despite the fact that they're missing William Karlsson, they were missing Jack Eichel, and I believe they were also missing Shea Theodore, one of their best defensemen. They're still a very good team. And the Vegas Golden Knights proved that as they come back in the third period, turning a 2-0 deficit into a 3-2 victory in the regulation period. But it's just the Pittsburgh Penguins falling into their old ways. They did it so many times last season that they led the league in blown third period leads. And then we saw it at the beginning of this year, the season opener. They go into the third period against the Chicago Blackhawks team that has not been very good this season, and they have not been very good all season long, especially in that opener. Penguins blow that lead. They do the exact same thing against the Buffalo Sabres around Thanksgiving, where they had a 2-0 lead on the road. They decided to put it in park. They decided that that was enough for them to win the game, and Buffalo proved them wrong. And this happened again tonight. Vegas wins this one by a final score of 3-2. The Pittsburgh Penguins blow a third period lead in a night where it was a very important game for them. You look around the NHL, and yes, it might be a little early to scoreboard watch, but considering how many teams are so close together in the Eastern Conference and how one win could have shifted them from, I believe, 6th in the wild card standings to 3rd in the wild card standings, 1 point out of a wild card position, it's a big game. Now, again, I don't think the sky is falling. I saw a lot of that sentiment on X last night, but it's one game at the end of the day. You have to just forget it, just as you forgot that 7-0 loss to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and you have to move on to the next one, because a lot of people forget that loss to the Maple Leafs was in the midst of this stellar run that the Penguins have been on since December 9th. So you have to do the same thing. It stings. It's unfortunate. You should have at the very least come away with 1 standings point. But at the end of the day, it is 1 loss. It is a loss that is going to hopefully not haunt the Pittsburgh Penguins, but it is a loss nonetheless that counts as 1 just as much as a 7-0 loss or a loss where they would have been down 4-1 the entire game. So let's get into our goal recap before we continue to talk about what this loss means for the Pittsburgh Penguins. It was a silent first period for the second straight game for the Pittsburgh Penguins. They leave it with a score of 0-0 after the opening 20, and that's been a recipe for success for them because as of late, their Achilles heel has been their starts. We saw on Monday that they fixed that against the Seattle Kraken. They ended up going on to win 3-0. It felt for a time that that's exactly what they were going to do in this one, because in the second period, the Pittsburgh Penguins turned on the afterburners for about 4 minutes to get a couple goals past Logan Thompson. It started with Ryan Graves making a beautiful play, taking the puck from the point, activating down into the zone, going behind the net where everybody thought he was going to have a wraparound. He banks it off of Logan Thompson for his 3rd goal of the season, 2nd against the Vegas Golden Knights. His first goal as a member of the Penguins was against Vegas at home a couple of months ago. He scores his 3rd goal of the season. Erik Karlsson extends his point streak with a primary assist on that one. 8 games in a row now for Erik Karlsson on the score sheet, 25th assist of the season. And Evgeny Malkin picks up the secondary assist, and as we'll get to, that was about the only positive thing that number 71 was able to do on this night. Pittsburgh Penguins then extend their lead to 2-0, like I mentioned, on a beautiful goal by Jake Guentzel. He just wired a shot past Logan Thompson after a nice setup from Sidney Crosby. That's Guentzel's 20th goal of the season. Sorry, there's a typo on the graphic there. 20th goal of the season for Jake Guentzel. 7th time he's done that in his career. Sidney Crosby picks up his 21st assist, and Marcus Pettersson gets his 16th assist as he too also had a pretty rough third period, as we'll get to. So the 2 players with the secondary assists for the Penguins end up being the 2 guys that are probably the most to blame for the loss in the third period. But let's move over to that third period of play, because the Penguins took a 2-0 lead, stellar play, and you thought, okay, 20 minutes 20 miles for 20 smiles, and they'll get out of Vegas with a victory, and they'll climb up the Eastern Conference standings. Not so fast, say the defending Stanley Cup champions. Lead is cut from 2-0 to 2-1 on Jonathan Marchessault's 20th goal of the season. Assists go to Ivan Barbashev and Alec Martinez. Marchessault just out-muscled Marcus Pettersson in the front of the net. Pettersson ends up on his wallet, and the puck ends up in the back of the net. That's never a good combination for the Pittsburgh Penguins as it goes to 2-1. Just about a minute and a half later, Pavel Dorofeyev, 6th goal of the season, very similar in fashion, where he's able to go to the net front unobstructed, not taken out of the action at all, and he's able to bury one past Tristan Jarry. Like I said, his 6th goal of the season. Assists go to Chandler Stevenson and the captain, Mark Stone, who picks up his 32nd apple on the year. And then again, shortly after that, Penguins defensive breakdown gives Brendan Brisson a wide open lane to the net. He does not miss his first career goal in the National Hockey League. That stands as the game-winning goal for this one as 000s hit. Ivan Barbashev gets his 12th assist, and Alex Pietrangelo picks up his 17th. That's where things stood, like I mentioned, at 000s. Penguins lose by a final score of 3-2 with those goals. Let's get into 3 stars before we get into some of the negatives and kind of break down where this game leaves the Pittsburgh Penguins. 3rd star of this game, I'm going to give it to Ryan Graves. Just mentioned up there at the top that he scored the opening goal for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But honestly, once again, for the 2nd consecutive game, he looked pretty good on the side, the other side of Erik Karlsson, I should say. He was put back on that unit before Monday's game against Seattle. He had a pretty solid performance there, had a pretty solid performance here as well. Maybe this is the turning point for Ryan Graves. We all hope that it is, because the Pittsburgh Penguins need Ryan Graves to perform at least closer to his contract than he has to this point of the season. Made a few nice standout plays in the defensive zone in the 1st and 2nd period, but like I mentioned, not very many Pittsburgh Penguins did that in the final frame. 2nd star of this one, not on the score sheet, but I'm going to give it to Colin White. This was really his first game as a member of the Pittsburgh Penguins. He did play last Saturday night against the Carolina Hurricanes, but you can only take so much from that because he wasn't expecting to play. Yes, you always have to be ready. But this is a guy that hasn't played at the NHL level since the Stanley Cup final of last year when he was a member of the Florida Panthers. So getting thrown in at the last second, no less against a team in Carolina who makes it very difficult to play regardless, I'm willing to give him a mulligan on that performance. Tonight, he looked very good for the Pittsburgh Penguins against the Vegas Golden Knights. Really liked what I saw from him. 3rd line had some jump for the first time in a very long time. Lars Eller looked like he had an extra level. Valtteri Puustinen looked evident on the ice for the first time in a while, and I think a large part of that is Colin White coming in, the style of play that he played, and was able to be that missing piece for them for a couple of shifts there. Let's see if they're able to build on that, and let's see if they're able to do that consistently and start finding the back of the net. That would be huge for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Not only that, Colin White had a really great screen on Logan Thompson on the Pittsburgh Penguins' 2nd goal. He was deployed out there for a shift with Crosby and Gensel. He gets in front of the net, does what he does best, obstructs the vision of the goaltender, and Jake Gensel's able to pick a corner because of that. So a solid performance from Colin White on his mulligan Penguins debut. That's what I'm going to call it for Colin White. A solid performance for him. 1st star of the game is for the player that scored his first NHL goal in this one, Brendan Brisson, son of Sidney Crosby's agent, Pat Brisson, if you didn't know that. Now, if you watched last night, you do know that because they mentioned it about 80 times, but if you didn't watch, you might not know. Sidney Crosby's agent has a son. His son scored his first NHL goal against Sidney Crosby. Crosby was on the ice, so too was Evgeny Malkin, so too, I believe, was Marcus Pettersson, or I don't remember the defensemen that were out there, but I do know that Evgeny Malkin and Sidney Crosby were both on the ice at that time as the Penguins were trying to tilt back and trying to get that lead back after giving up 2 and giving up that 2-0 lead. But Brendan Brisson, nice shot, perfect celly, and a good night for the kid for the Vegas Golden Knights. Not a good night for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And with that, let's move over to our final thoughts, and it is about number 71. Now, before I get into that, actually, I will mention this was a night where Marcus Pettersson probably played his worst period of hockey this entire season. I mean, not the best time for it because he was out there struggling to stay on his skates for one, which is new. And secondly, he was blowing defensive coverages left and right in the 3rd period. That is a reason why you look at this and I see everybody with the sky is falling sentiment. And I'm saying, listen, yes, the Pittsburgh Penguins performed poorly in the 3rd period, but this isn't something new. This is an issue that they've had in the past, and this is an issue that, quite frankly, you look at and you say, well, Evgeny Malkin, as we'll get to, was probably the worst he's been all season last night. And Marcus Pettersson, I don't think I've ever seen Marcus Pettersson struggle that much in a period. And that's the guy that you depend on to go out there and stop the bleeding in the defensive zone. So, I think with that, yes, it is a bad loss. It is a loss that old problems crept up and you think, okay, well, it's still in them. You always have to know that that is in them, that they're able to go out there and just absolutely fumble the bag in the final frame after even playing a almost picture perfect opening 40 minutes. Yeah, that's worrisome. But at the end of the day, it's the same thing as the 7-0 loss. You wipe the slate clean. You're not playing a lot of hockey in the next 21 days. I believe they have 3 games in the next 20 days or something like that. Go out strong. Come back on Monday against the Arizona Coyotes, as we'll talk about. Get that victory and wipe the slate clean. It is a bad loss. It is an unfortunate loss. It is a costly loss considering where you could have been if you won that. But the Pittsburgh Penguins, they still have games in hand on almost everybody in the Eastern Conference except for the Senators, and the Senators are in the basement. So they're still in a half-decent position. It's an unfortunate loss, but you need to move on. Let's get to our final thoughts here. Evgeny Malkin was so far out of it in this game. Now, he's been far out of it at times this season. He's been far out of it at times throughout his entire career. But in this game, he never had it. He never had an ounce of fire in this game or an ounce of responsible play in this game. Yeah, maybe he made a couple of plays in the defensive zone that I clocked, but for the most part, he was poor in the defensive zone. He was ineffective in the offensive zone, and he was really relying on guys like Drew O'Connor and Brian Rust to drive play on his line. And that is not something I think I've ever said about Evgeny Malkin over an entire 60-minute performance. His lack of urgency on the man advantage is turning him into a liability. It's frustrating and it's unacceptable from a guy that is supposed to be, and probably will be still, a first ballot Hall of Famer. He is. He can't be that bad on the man advantage because a lot of people want to point to Erik Karlsson as to why the Pittsburgh Penguins power play, which didn't score again in this one, although they only got one opportunity. A lot of people point to Erik Karlsson as to why that man advantage isn't working. Evgeny Malkin is just as culpable. He has just as little urgency on the point. He is turning the puck over just as much as Erik Karlsson, and some of that builds on each other. The two of them together, something just isn't clicking at the top of the key there. And considering where the Pittsburgh Penguins like to start their power play, one of the two has to go. And I would assume at this point, I would say it's Evgeny Malkin. He needs to be taken off that top unit because it's not just on the power play now. You saw what he did last night in the third period. You saw what he did on that game-winning goal against Brendan Brisson. If you didn't go back and look at it, Brisson, or the puck carrier, let me go back through it here. The puck carrier was Ivan Barbashev, was marked. He was covered. Brisson slid right behind Malkin because Malkin, for some reason, took a kamikaze direct flight trying to take out the puck carrier and Barbashev. And what did he do? He left Brisson wide open in the slot. It turns into the game-winning goal. And at that point, the Pittsburgh Penguins really had very little hope of coming back. Yes, it's a 1-goal deficit, but when you see the Penguins slow down to the point you saw them slow down last night, it's going to be hard for them to kick things back into gear, especially against a team in Vegas who, from top to bottom, usually play that responsible brand of hockey. So maybe it's time you take Evgeny Malkin off the top unit. Every time the puck reaches him, even if it's not a turnover, it's a boneheaded pass or just a shot on goal that never had a chance. He's not making smart plays in the offensive zone. Not when on the power play, not at 5-on-5. And he was completely, like I mentioned, out to lunch on multiple occasions in the defensive zone. You can't have that with this team. You just can't. The bottom six is going to go out there and they're going to try to play defense. The top six is going to go out there. They're going to try to need you to get offense. And with Evgeny Malkin out to lunch in the defensive zone and not producing in the offensive zone, it's time that the Pittsburgh Penguins take a serious look at him and say, listen, we need more. We need more. We need you to be mentally in the game a little bit more. We need you to be a little bit more physically in the game in the defensive zone. And we just need you to be Evgeny Malkin in the offensive zone. He hasn't been that at times this season, and that is a scary thing for the Pittsburgh Penguins, who are going to rely on this guy going down the stretch to help push them into the playoffs. Sidney Crosby is willing this team forward. They're getting some contributions here and there from around the lineup. The bottom six does their part at the most point on the defensive side of things. They haven't kicked in on the offensive side, but you're hoping that comes at some point. You can't have Evgeny Malkin be at the lunch. It's just not a good thing. I'm frustrated watching him. I'm sure he's frustrated with the way he's playing because he's a guy that takes great pride in his performance. The Pittsburgh Penguins might need to take the cookies away from Evgeny Malkin. Bump him down off the power play. Try to get something through to him that, listen, you need to be better when it comes to the man advantage, and you need to be better when it comes to the game overall. He's had good stretches, but for the most part, he has struggled for large portions of this season. And at what point do we say, all right, Rickard Rakell struggled with him, got injured, came back, went with Sid, and he's been fine. Riley Smith started to struggle a lot. At what point does it become Evgeny Malkin's problem? I don't know. It's hard to say about a guy that has been so good for so long in his career, but it looks like the descent has started. Let's hope he can push back from that, because it's not, a point of no return for Evgeny Malkin. Let's hope that he's able to return and be that dominant player that we saw even last season and at points this season as well. That's going to do it for this episode. Like I mentioned, the Pittsburgh Penguins head to the Mullet Arena on Monday night to take on the Arizona Coyotes before another extended break, 3 days off before they face off on Friday again back at PPG Paints Arena. But they got to get back big. They got to respond against the Arizona Coyotes on Monday evening. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. You can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins or anywhere you get your podcasts.